Well, if you hadn't have left the church, you wouldn't be feeling that way. You wouldn't be feeling that way.
That's the beginning of
This is your story. I'm Amy, amyloganlife.com. I am your post-religious faith transition life coach. And I want to know, answer me this. Have you ever felt like you've gone through this and you feel happy, you're ecstatic, you feel free, you feel all these emotions that are wonderful. And then you have your days that you either get scared, you're fearful of the future, you're not sure what happens in the next life, if there is a next life. You get angry when you have a memory of something that happened, or you're really sad when you have those moments of sadness of what you thought life was going to be and you had all the answers. And then you have a really bad day, but you feel like you have to fake it because you've heard people in your family or friends say, well, if you hadn't have left the church, you wouldn't be feeling that way. I have felt those emotions. The thing that members aren't realizing, whether this is friends and family, sitting in church and you hear a talk or at general conference, is you're human. Okay? Newsflash. Just as much as you were human before you left the church, now you find yourself on the other side of this and you've left the church, or you're thinking about it. And we have this shame that's built around our emotions around it because we feel like we have to put on this face like we're happy all the time. Well, because you are human, that means some days are not as pleasant as others, but that is just the human experience. But what I want you to do is, as you're building your self-confidence, as you're taking all these steps, right? Because everything's new. You're navigating life in a way that you haven't before, which means you are thinking new philosophies. Maybe, I hope you're studying new philosophies. You may be experimenting with alcohol. You may be smoking pot for the first time. You may be having sex and not being married. All the things that we have a lot of, I don't want to say guilt, because hopefully you've left the guilt of some of those things, but it feels very uncomfortable because of the conditioning that's happened in our heads. And I don't even mean things like that. It could be going to the beach on Sunday. It could be going to an R-rated movie, right? This doesn't have to involve alcohol in any way, shape, or form. But when you have this kind of new lease on life and you want to start experimenting with things because you don't have the guilt that you used to have with it, sometimes that can catch you off guard and you could have some feelings mixed in with that you're not sure how to navigate. And maybe we can completely head down that line of thinking in another video. But what I want to focus on today is when you're having a bad day and someone tells you, well, if you hadn't left the church, you wouldn't be experiencing that. Let them have that thought. Because let me tell you, as is evident by a comment I just received on my last video, my one about what I believe now, people don't think what you're going through is that difficult, that it's easier to leave the church than to stay in it. And to that I just say, that's an ignorant thing to say. Okay, you know that and I know that, but the people who are still in the church who are judging, now I know not everybody judges that way, but if you're like me and you've heard that before, I just go, wow, that's a silly thought. Of course, I don't believe that, and I know you don't believe that because your lived experience tells you otherwise. Show up as human as you are, even if those in your friends and family, your people you work with, they're going to have their thoughts, right? We talk about this a lot. They're going to think what they want to think, no matter what you say. And I've also said this like on repeat. You can't convince anyone of anything. You're having your experience about all of this. And that is real, it is raw, it is authentic, it is your story. So when someone says that, honestly, just let it flow past you because it can get in your head and really kind of mess with you for a little bit. And if you have feelings of sadness, anger, fear, frustration, madness, that's normal, all right? That is part of this process. No one really gets away from it. It is just a reality that we deal with. So someone who hasn't been through it, if they're trying to tell you what you should be experiencing or that you should be experiencing it differently, they just don't know what they're talking about. As hard as it could be, when you get that kind of feedback, if you can be letting it go or just letting it roll past you, that will serve you much better than focusing on something someone said. This is your story, right? You have your own story, and it's even different from my story. You have different people in your story. You have different experiences that have brought you to this point that here we are sitting together talking, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration. The best thing you can do is just keep going through this as authentically as you can. So of course, it's don't let other people's thoughts get into yours and mess with you, because you have every right to show up with whatever emotion you are feeling any day of the week. And don't let that comment of, well, if you just stayed, you wouldn't be feeling that. They don't understand, and they don't need to understand. They haven't lived it. And that's just kind of an ignorant blanket statement to make because that takes out of the equation that you're human, they're human, we're all human, and we get to experience all the ranges of emotion, right? Every single emotion you will experience as you walk this path. So just wanted to talk about that. Let me know your feelings down below. Has anyone ever said that to you, or have you ever felt that way? I know that I often would feel some shame wrapped around it. Now, shame is an emotion or a feeling that we have based on thoughts we're thinking. Of course, every emotion that we think is based on thoughts. So once you can go, hey, I'm human, I get to experience this, and no one gets to dictate the way that I feel my emotions, then you're dealing with it in a much healthier way than then turning around and lashing out at the people who are judging you for something they have no experience judging you on.